Welcome back to Channel Water. Today we're going to talk about technology, the extension of technology out from consciousness to the world of matter. We'll touch a little bit on artificial intelligence, but that will be a whole other video. And we'll try to explain the beginning, just the beginning, into understanding of what is technology, how consciousness operates in the world of matter, and its extensions out to the world of matter. So to start understanding what is technology, there's something that we can say very clearly. We separate between the organic world, the biological world, and the technological world. The technological world is a world made of matter, dead matter. The biological world is made out of organisms, it's alive. And here in the channel, it's even easier to separate between water as the extension of consciousness and matter as just building blocks that are lifeless. Throughout billions of years of evolution, we can see that life has only evolved around and with water. Life has managed to evolve into every other possible condition. The different variations of temperatures, with light, without light, with oxygen, without oxygen. Life will evolve to survive in any possible condition. And somehow, there's not even one organism, one life form that has evolved to survive without water, or that it's not based on water. And that makes sense here in Channel Water because we claim that water is not only the source of life, water is life. Water is the thing that is inherently alive in this equation. So we never saw rocks, elements evolve on their own, making life forms on their own. The reason that's important here in the conversation about technology is that we have to understand that technology is basically, by definition, it's not the biological organic world that we have of organisms that are based on water. It's everything that we made, man-made technologies that are an extension of us, of consciousness, but they're all made out of matter, dead matter. All of them are made out of materials that are inherently not alive, not conscious. So are we able at some point to breathe life into matter, to create a computer that will be conscious? Or is consciousness something that predates technology? And what does that mean? We think of ourselves as technology. Most people think that evolution randomly created a brain, and the brain created consciousness in that way, that consciousness emerged out of a certain level of complexity in technology. So we start to think, well, if we create computers, if brain is like a computer, then we'll reach a certain level of complexity within a computer, and by that it will gain consciousness. We know that technology can be aware of its surrounding and react to it, but that's by design that we give it. But will a computer or any kind of technology that we create will ever be conscious on its own? That's a question that we have to look into very deeply. So a lot of those questions are very philosophical in their appearance, but they're also physical and technical as you look at it. So one thing we know is that water is the first contact between consciousness and matter, the reality that we live in. Water is the first contact. That's the first place where life moves, creates, designs, makes, manipulates matter. And we know that from the oceans, the rivers, the atmosphere, the way it shapes and moves matter, but also from life emerging out of the oceans, out of the rivers, out of water. And then one can say that the last point of contact is going to be the human body. And we are the ones that now are scaling up and creating a whole new network of technologies that we do control and use to manipulate and operate life around us. So there's water in my body. My body is the first and last technology in that sense between me and matter. And at this point it might be a tool in my hand, a hammer or a pencil, a keyboard, and very soon just brainwaves, just thought. So then through thoughts, which originate in consciousness, through the water, to matter, further out, extending to matter, that's how we'll work in this reality. That's how we'll manipulate and operate the nature around us. So the human body is designed to both be the mediator between consciousness and matter, and you can see that the material world around us, there's no technologies evolving on their own. We have never come across a technology that just happened. Everything was conceived and made by us with these hands. And then all the actions that we do, we cut, we glue, we manipulate, we create, we invent. And then there'll be a point where we're completely independent from any physical connection to matter, and we extend out and manipulate matter by using matter. So matter will manipulate matter. The technology that can receive my brainwaves will actually manipulate further into matter. So you can start seeing how our body is not just a tool, it's also a broadcast center. So the brain receives knowledge from consciousness and broadcasts out to matter, right? So we have water to matter in our body, from that matter broadcasting out further. So this whole idea of the global consciousness, the cloud, receiving, broadcasting, you can see that our body is that technology to begin with. Now we're just extending that further out. So from the beginning, the design of our body was for that full spectrum of creating that world in which our brain will be able to broadcast out to. But it's important to understand that your brain is not your identity. That's not where you reside. That's not who you are. Our whole body is conscious in that way. And we could have, in theory, we could have just mapped a different part of our body and used that to broadcast out our thoughts and ideas. But part of the design, part of what we know, is the place that would be most complex and efficient in broadcasting complex ideas. We use the brain. We actually work mapping the brain, mapping brain waves, and then we will use those to completely control our physical environment. So philosophically, it's important to see that there's a user, consciousness, there's a hardware that it uses and expands out, and there's a software within the hardware that we write, that we design. And that software is there to serve our needs. It doesn't write itself, we write it, we design it, and even if we wanted to write itself, we'll design that. So we are the user, we are the ones in control, we are the creative substance of life that is basically has needs and has desires, and it uses hardware and software to achieve those things. But the hardware itself is made out of matter, and the hardware is bound to the laws of physics, the laws of matter. The metals, the silicon, gold, silver, whatever we're using, all of that is bound within the laws of physics, the laws of matter. That's the science we use to understand how to expand out our commands and how to manipulate matter and use it in the best way. And eventually what you see is that we mostly build structures of communication and structures of housing for water, for consciousness. The reason it's important to understand that the hardware is made out of matter that's not alive is because that's where the software is. That's where the software lives in a way. So artificial intelligence is nothing more than code within that hardware. So that hardware in its essence is not alive and will not be alive. It will only do what we tell it to do, and it will only be as complex as we need it to be. And our desire is to make it as complex as possible so it can replace as many of the functions that we currently need to do. Driving is not something that we necessarily need to spend our time on, nor do we do it that well, because we're talking about movements of objects within space that are just for a function. That function could be achieved much better by just the software that we write. We as creative beings that are easily distracted by our daydreaming, by our communications, but by our other desires of what we actually want to do, we don't make for such good drivers in a way. So that's where artificial intelligence comes in and is very helpful in that sense. Whenever it comes to operating functionally within the material world, we can write softwares that would do it and free us from the burden or the work of having to do it ourselves. And it's important to understand what is the use and purpose of all those networks. Because it's easy to go into a sci-fi theory or dream that the technology itself will have desires or come to life, when in reality it's really all about the user. We are the user, we'll always be the user. So whether we're talking about cars, you can have a whole system of cars driving by itself, but no car will ever desire or have a need to go to anywhere but fuel itself. But we know the use that we have for communicating or commuting from point A to point B, even if it's just to meet a friend and have a conversation or celebrate a birthday. So that part is important to understand. You can create an entire automated world, but without a user that actually has a desire and need to operate within it, it will always be lifeless. It will be automated but lifeless. So for example, the internet. We can make this amazing network that has hardwares, communication around the world, software, hard drives, clouds. It's infinite in its size, scale, and ability. But there's not even one element of it that will actually create content or consume content. It's really the content is where we are. We are the ones that will write a script, a story, a movie, a song, tutorials, this video you're watching right now. Everything that you will consume online is made by consciousness. And even if it was that one exception of something that was automatically created, again, we are the one that subscribe that. We write that software of telling you the news, the weather, things that are easy to predict and easy to communicate. So it's just the nature of business. We try to save money and we'll automate that system. But we are the ones. We are the user. We make the content. And now we even get to the idea of entertainment, right? You don't need to entertain your car, your computer, your home. Entertainment is something that only consciousness can truly appreciate, understand, and create in that sense. Consciousness itself both designs the hardware, writes the software, and then creates the content. That's something that we should never forget. Everything that happens from consciousness outwards. And at no point there's a branch that is separate from that. And if matter itself had any need for entertainment, we would see something happening on the moon or on some other planet somewhere. But matter itself, the rocks, the elements, the minerals, are fully content the way they are. They, on their own, would not change, would not do anything, will not make anything, will not evolve. If that was the case, we would have seen other forms of evolution that has nothing to do with water. We would see things happening on other planets where we're surrounded by infinite amount of planets with all the different elements in all the many combinations you can imagine. but we know what we need for life. Water, liquid water, in a certain condition. And that's it. There's no other option. There's not even one place that we found a different option. So when we look at technology, artificial intelligence, it's important to remember that. That has not changed. We're just talking about an extension of that system that originated in water and before that in consciousness. It's just that through water, all that happens. For example, if you find a piece of hardware or a rock on the moon, it doesn't matter. You will not find a user in it. You'll never find a user physically inside of any piece of hardware. You will never find life inside of any piece of hardware. So however you can arrange minerals, doesn't matter what combinations you put them together, if you look closely, you will never find it. Even if I store all of my memories on a hard drive, you will not find me there. And in that sense, my brain is a hardware. That's where I store my memories right now, because consciousness only experiences in the present moment. And in order to build this personality, it stores and accumulates experiences. And that's what creates a person. And of course, once you leave the body, you leave all that behind, you leave that personality behind, and you go back to being just pure consciousness. That will be a whole other video where we explain exactly what personality is, how you were made, what are you before this person, and how that works. But it's important to just touch on that as we touch into the ideas of artificial intelligence, of what is technology, and that illusion of separation. So we'll talk a lot about separation today and how there is no separation. A lot of the questions we get and a lot of the questions around technology and AI is whether artificial intelligence will take over, whether we will join with technology, with artificial intelligence, whether all kinds of questions that in their basis they're not correct because they assume that separation. So there is no separation between the evolution of mankind and the evolution outwards into technology. The technology is made by us, for us, and the only difference is that because we are water beings dealing with electricity in very high voltages, we are waterproofed. We're actually separated physically from everything that operates around us. So if you imagine a person sitting at the computer, at a keyboard, and making an order, there is no separation really between the spark in my body that creates that thought, that idea, and that desire out to the muscle, to the order that flows further out and operates out in the reality, comes back to me. All of that is internal. The only separation that I have an illusion of is that I'm separated from the body around me, that I'm an individual, that all of those things are not me. So it's like a person that thinks that their own hand is not part of their own body. Everything around you is part of you, is an extension of you. So we are extending out, growing, and in that sense creating a whole new body, a bigger reality that we operate within. So whenever you hear questions that are based on the idea of separation, technology is not us, technology is not nature, and that gives us also that separation of man is not part of nature, or man is destroying nature around us. While we know that evolution is taking place, we know that nature is constantly evolving and nature is adapting. What is the environment we're adapting to? Space. That's where life needs to survive, right? So the survival of life is happening out into space, and technology is what we're calling it and using it to do that. In your body, we have all of the technologies that will create outside of us. Nothing we're making is new. We're actually not even close to the levels of technology that we have in our body. So in some ways, it's kind of funny how we separate from that and we see it as an exterior thing, a separation from nature, a movement away from something, when in reality it's just natural growth. And it is probably the most important part of our survival as consciousness in space. The fact that something is outside of your body doesn't mean that it's not part of your body. And in that sense, maybe the way to look at it is to understand how your body is part of a bigger body, how we are not the individual we think we are. We're just a pixel within that bigger screen, in a sense, of life. So our bodies are more of a cloud on one hand and a channel. So we both broadcast out and we feel further out. We know that even in a chemical level, we are extended further out than we think. But even our body, like your lungs, are actually an exterior space. Your lungs could be inverted out, and you'll have like a tree coming out of your mouth that gets oxygen from the air, or all of the gut bacteria that we have, all the way from here to the exit point. That's an exterior space that has a lot of different organisms that are not you, quote unquote. It's all you. But you are this marketplace in a way. So we're nothing more than a channel of water and matter, in that sense, that operates in a much bigger body. So, and that's how a body is structured. It's just networks of channels. In them you have communication, matter, water, all of that flows through. So at some point we have to lose that idea of separation, both ourselves from the nature around us and also from what we're creating and how we relate to our inventions, and in that sense both the past and future. We're connected to both of them. We are the nature that was always here, and we are the nature that will evolve out to space. It's only one thing. At no moment there was a separation. And that separation leads us to good and bad, or feelings of one is destroying another, rather than one long line of evolution. Over time, we'll also see a lot of the technologies around us shrink down and find their way back into us. We'll find the complete wireless connection between our brain waves to the technologies around us. Some of those will be shared. At some point, your thoughts might be too loud for somebody else. Your music, your projections, whatever it is that you'll do, we might share this same space, a brain space. That's what we call, brainstorming, right? We might actually see that. It might be a real thing, a brainstorm of a few people together coming up with ideas and thoughts as we move into the future. I think we're doing that right now, but we'll see that happening in a way that is really like the atmosphere around us. We might even understand the clouds a bit better in that moment. Part of the source of confusion is the way we perceive the theory of evolution, right? On one hand, evolution shows us one tree of life evolving, but at the same time, for some reason, we see it as individuals within that tree. A lot of people think each individual has its own local evolution that is driven by randomness rather than intention. And in that way, it looks like those individuals are not connected. So it's not that the flower and the bird fit perfectly by design as a bigger system. It's just that the bird happened to fit to the flower that happened to be to the... It's all fully random. When we look at nature closely, that's not the case. We actually find bigger systems that are working together. And then came the idea of coevolution. But again, once you take out the randomness from the equation of evolution, everything makes sense. But within that idea of random individuals that are separately evolving, we get this illusion and confusion that technology itself will evolve that way, separate of us, independent of us, with all kind of weird mutations that might cause to our demise at the end. Or again, this is just fear-based thought and negativity that comes into the mainstream and confuses a lot of people. It doesn't confuse the real scientist. It just confuses people through our journalism, clickbait ideas, and really just the spread of negativity within our culture. But the reality is that all of technology, all of artificial intelligence, everything that we make as one system for one body that is growing forward together. So the way we describe it is that consciousness is the one operating in the material world, and matter is the glove on the hands of consciousness. So water is the first layer, that first glove that we use to operate in the material world. And then matter itself is the housing, the technology, all of the structures, right? The physical structures that both allows us for housing and for communication. But that glove, that house, those technologies will never be conscious. If something is designed to house consciousness, that house is not going to become conscious. If the wire is designed to have communication flow through it, that wire is not going to start communicating on its own. So even by design, it's not designed to do that, so it's not going to. But also we know matter. We know how matter behaves. We know the order within matter, and we don't see the same behavior that we see with consciousness. With consciousness, we see that behavior of creating, making. That's the only place that you might not be able to predict a certain action or behavior. Really, the only way to have any type of real randomness, which is very hard to achieve, will come through consciousness rather than through matter. A fun way to see that, to see how consciousness is the person, the character, the individual within the world of matter. Phones, cars, homes, we're the ones that personalize them. We're the ones that will always add that fingerprint, that signature of creativity. So again, we're all pixels of one body of consciousness, but we're all pixels of creativity, of expression. So in every point, you get a different expression, you get a different creative force. None of us look the same, none of us dress the same. All of us buy the same phone and the same car, but yet you'll know which one is yours, just because of those little things we do. And the more we can customize it, the happier we are. The more we can make it our own, the more we can express ourselves through that. We don't really appreciate when something is the same. So in a sense, you can see that in uniform, right? If tomorrow you told all of humanity, everyone has to wear a uniform, there'll be huge riots. I mean, we will see that as somebody trying to oppress our personality and creativity. The places that we do wear uniform is places that we do need to oppress personality and creativity, like the military, right? When you want people to behave like matter, to behave like a machine, like a robot, to order, to obey your orders, then you dress them up in uniform. You make them look the same. You make them behave the same. You do everything that you can to take away creativity, personality, the individual thought. So it's very clear that distinction between matter and consciousness through that expression of personality. And we see that matter itself, you go to a store that has all the phones, they will not do anything on their own to make themselves stand out or look different. But the minute we get it in our hands, we immediately customize, personalize. Everything changes to the individual fingerprint of each one of us. You can see how consciousness is trying to free ourselves from those type of work that takes away our personality. So when the Industrial Revolution, or even just farmers, All those work, this type of work where people did wear uniform, did act uniformly, did the same action over and over again, or even being soldiers, all those types of work that really oppresses personality and our creativity, we try to automate them and make matter do that work, so we will be free from that. We see how oppressive that could be. We see how people want to free themselves from that work, and consciousness will use artificial intelligence and technology to do that. And by doing that, we'll create this freedom to be in this world where we just create and destroy, basically. We're the creator and the destroyer at the same time. Hopefully we'll create more than we destroy. And that would be how basically nature grows. That's the movement forward. We constantly make more, we build more, and we grow. As we know, that's what nature does. It just, the movement is more. Growing, housing, consciousness. We need to also see that intelligence is not consciousness. Intelligence is a way that we measure complexity within technology, both human technology and the technology around us. So all technology is artificial. All of it, including you, in this body. This body is artificial. The technology we create outside of it is artificial. And then we can give it more and more intelligence over time, but it will never be consciousness. So now we're talking about general intelligence. There are all kind of different words that come up to try and say that at some point artificial intelligence will be conscious or have consciousness. And that will not be the case, because we're only talking about intelligence. We're talking about complexity of operation within a technology. How smart your phone is, how smart your car will be, how smart a computer will be, what it will be able to perform. We already have computers that are more complex in their structure and the amount of calculations they can do than our brain. Assuming that you can even compare the two, right? But in the way that scientists look at the brain as a computer, which I don't agree with, but in that way, in that measurement, computers already have surpassed our brain. Yet, they're not conscious yet. They're not even close. So it's important to understand what is intelligence and how that is not consciousness. Two different things. So in one place you can put an input of a problem, data, and get an output. The more intelligent you are, the faster you'll get that output, the faster you'll solve that problem. But consciousness is the one that even defines what the question is, what the problem is, and what is the goal we're going towards, for which we need to solve those problems. So you can have GPS and weather and all those calculations, but without somebody that cares about his location, what the weather is, and what I want to do that day, it doesn't even matter. And we can see that with people. You can take a person, give them a faster phone, faster computer, faster car, faster airplane, and a whole corporation under their hands, and that person will seemingly be more intelligent now. It will have a much higher ability than anyone else in arriving to a location, a conclusion, a solution. All of those things will just be faster, more efficient, and in that sense, that person will be also more successful, right? So even within the limitation of your personal intelligence, you can increase the general intelligence you have around you. So in that way, it's important to understand the difference between the creativity of consciousness to the functionality of intelligence. One way that consciousness is different from intelligence is that consciousness so far is the only thing that made something out of nothing. It's the only one that can really, truly create in this world, make something out of nothing. And we have a whole separate video about why there is something rather than nothing and what exists outside of time and space. So in that way, it's important to understand consciousness is the one doing that, bringing something out of not thing. So, and no intelligence can do that. No computer can do that. You don't even have the perception to think of that, desire that, or see the benefit of something new coming about. Because matter is always content the way it is. Water is never content in the condition it is right now. We're constantly moving forward to a place where water, the body of consciousness, will be physically content and in the conditions it wants to be. So we can always see that in the world around us and in space around us, matter, all of the elements, chemicals, minerals, they're all content. They're all fully content. There's actually zero desire to have any change occur or any evolution on their side or on their end. They're only tools and building blocks that are used by consciousness to evolve further, and maybe made by consciousness to begin with for that purpose. So from consciousness on, everything is artificial. In theory, philosophically speaking, consciousness is the only thing that is not artificial, and anything from that moment on is artificial. You can say that even the existence of matter is artificial, created by consciousness, possibly, but anything that consciousness uses to make with matter is artificial. Your entire nature, everything we admire and love so much, from animal to a tree to plankton, everything is artificial. It's an expression of consciousness. When I see the world artificial, I even see that kind of art and facade, some kind of a expression, right? It's a physical expression that comes from consciousness. So from consciousness on, any line of separation is an illusion. So even thinking that there is artificial intelligence or technology itself separated or man separated from nature, any line of separation is an illusion and will always come back to hurt you by not seeing that it is you. Anything in the world around you that you look at and you don't think it's you, you have the potential of judging it, hurting it, and hate, anger, all those things. That's where they come from not seeing that everything around you is you. So it's very important that we don't lose sight of that, even when we look at technology. A person is a technology. A computer is a technology. All of those technologies are part of one body that's extending further. So when we go around and destroy anything around us, even if I think there's my enemy, I need to destroy their home or destroy another country, or any destruction is the self-destruction, self-hate. So there's no lines of separations, there's only extension out from consciousness to the world. And that's why we even talk about those things in this philosophical way, in a sense, to keep ourselves safe from seeing each one as an individual, evolutionary, random mutation that has some right over another because I evolved, I fit better to the conditions, and I should have the right to survive and continue, and not that person that I overcame, and not see the opposite of, like, if I did get to that point, if I am evolving further, it's up to me to reach a hand and carry everyone with me forward rather than push them back because I made it. This is what evolution does. It's random. It's mutations. It's the opposite. This is an evolution of creation by consciousness. Simple as that. When you look at the tree of evolution, if you suddenly realize there's no randomness in it, you see how carefully each step was made. You see how carefully each change was made. One of the issues we have is that when we even use the word mutation, we apply an intention there, that it was not calculated, that was not necessarily desired or positive, that it was a random occurrence, which is not the case. So we'll touch on that on another video about what does it mean to survive. Why even survive? Why did a rock get to a point of suddenly appreciating survival? What does it mean for a rock? So we'll get to that. Going back to artificial intelligence and software, it's important to understand algorithms, how they work, and how we design them. So you have input and you have output. And in between, we have a software that we write. And the goal is to get the output we want. We design it. We determine what the output would be. This is the really important part here. The input is the environment we're in, right? So that could be fully unpredictable, what the wind will be, what the temperature will be, where we are. So we take all the different inputs, we write a software that is intelligent. It's artificial because we wrote it, and we try to get the output that we want. A good example is a drone, right? So I fly drones. When I fly the drone, the input is infinite from all directions, different winds and movements, but we know what the output is, that my drone will be flat all the time, stabilized, and then will do what I tell it to do in spite of the conditions, right? So we are able to create microchips that will calculate all the input that comes in through sensors and then give us the output that we want, plus the intention that I have. My intention is stay in place and take a video. My intention is move forward in this direction, move back, come home. That's what I want. I use the intelligence of the software to achieve that within all the conditions. Before that, I just had to work harder. I used to fly helicopters and you do all the work. You're the one stabilizing, you're the one doing all the work. The input is coming to you. This is the artificial intelligence that processes that, and we get the output that we want. So we constantly outsource work to software, to artificial intelligence, to get the output we want. So it doesn't matter how complex AI is, a software is, it will always work to achieve the output we give it, the output that we desire. And we know that the input will be whatever it is. If I want my computer to recognize a face out of 10,000 faces, I'll design a software that can do that. So it will get infinite amount of faces, it will find the one that I want, right? But unless it has that need, the output that I want, the person that I'm looking for, again, there's no reason for that to even behave that way or design itself to do that. So for example, my drone has no personal desire or awareness. It has no need to fly anywhere on its own. It doesn't really want to do anything on its own. It will only do what we ask it to do. And then it's hard to even think about the drone having a desire. What would that even be, right? Everything it's designed to do is to a very specific outcome. The one thing I can see it doing is maybe flying to recharge and then come back, right? But that's again something I design. It's an output that I want. So that system of input and output, it's very important to understand when talking about artificial intelligence. And now we work on creating very, very complex systems between the input we get and the output we want. And the further we go, the more complex we create it, the better it will behave for us, for our sake, and for our own efficiency, and for our own creativity in that sense. As an artist, for me it's easier to talk about this and to understand what does it mean to not have an input and output? In the art world, a lot of times we improvise. And improvisation is something that is just beyond any thought and any prediction and calculation. When I draw, I don't even know where it's going to go. For some people, when they dance, they have no idea what the next move is going to be. So not only that we can't even see what the input is and where it's coming from, there is no way to predict the output. Even for myself, as I make my own artwork, I do not know what the output would be. The best I can hope for is to enjoy and feel the input as it comes through me. Again, as being that channel, you feel that. It's this beautiful dance and this beautiful feeling as you tune into that channel. But you will never know the output. And that is so joyful. That's the only small surprises we can actually have in life, is not knowing the output. Listening to music and not knowing where it's going to go. Watching a movie and not predicting the end of the movie or book. We appreciate outputs that are not predictable. We appreciate walking into a show and seeing something new, hearing something new. The idea of new, originality, improvisation, they're things that no intelligence, software can understand. Only consciousness appreciates and creates that. So try to see that in your own life. Where is the place you enjoy the most? That sense of improvisation, surprise, new, original, rather than the regular, automated, repeatable pace in life. It would actually be funny if our technology was unpredictable, would improvise, and not necessarily do what we expect it to do. That would be considered a bad product. Even if you can see the frustration people have if their phone, computer, car doesn't react exactly to what they expect for even 1 second. So it's really interesting, and I think that gives you maybe that connection to see how it's an extension of our bodies, not an extension of our mind, of our conscious mind. Our conscious mind cannot flow into matter, it can affect matter, it moves with matter, it uses matter. So, and the faster and better the reaction time, the happier we are. We appreciate quick reaction time, we appreciate seamless connectivity, we appreciate that through our movement. As we think about something and we do it, the faster and more accurate we do it, the better we feel about that technology. But if your car took you to an improvised place that it chose on its own, you will not be happy. If your phone called a random person you did not choose to talk to, you will not be happy. But if you did all those things, you will want them to happen as fast as possible, in the most efficient way, fastest way, however you feel good about it. But that's where you can feel. You have to try and feel that, feel those things. Your relationship to technology, or more to say, your relationship to the extended body, to yourself outside of you. You can feel it, you can see it. So notice when you get frustrated and when you're happy with the way it behaves. And like I said, when we look closer into technology, the more you zoom in, the more order you find, the materials, or in the softwares, the zeros and ones. But in the biological world, the more you zoom in, the more movement you find, the more organisms you find, the less predictable they are. So you can see that as you zoom in closer and closer, you see that one is inherently alive in constant movement. The other one is inherently dead, organized, and obeys our commands. So that's something that's important to remember, to see where water and matter are different and where improvisation rather than order. The one commanding and the one obeying the command. The one imagining and the technology we use to express that through or create that through. So those things are very visible if you understand what you see, if you look with the right eyes. And as we said in many videos, we are giants made out of conscious cells, trillions of conscious cells, but we don't see that. So when you spend some time in a microscope and you look at the different things, you will see that. You will see that difference. We see that technology, software, artificial intelligence, they're so less. They don't have a soul. They don't have the desire. They don't really have a need like we have. And if all human beings disappear tomorrow, that will be it for all of technology. It will not continue evolving. It will not continue making. It will only go as far as the fuel, electricity will carry it on. And there will be no one to maintain it and to keep it going. We could create a fully automated world where it maintains itself and takes care of itself, but again, at some point in time, that will stop operating. But the evolutionary force, like I said, the evolution of creation, that force that changes, makes things better, has those ideas or desires, that comes within the soul, the spirit, consciousness, that does not exist within the technology itself. It will always stop at some point where we will keep going. So at any moment of time, even now you can see there's people in Japan where all of their payments are automated, so they get paid and they pay all their bills and it's all fully automated, and somebody might pass away, and for a few months things will keep going as if the person is still alive. Payments will come in, bills will pay out, things will move on, but that system has no life in it. And once a neighbor will notice the smell from the apartment next door, that will come to a stop. So there is no value to money, energy, or even the visual world around us when there's no one to use and appreciate that. So even if I like certain colors, the colors themselves do not even know of their own existence. There's nothing else that can appreciate things in the way that we appreciate. And we see that through the art world and the way we appreciate beauty. And as we talked about improvisation before, you can see that there's only one place that happens within us, nowhere else. Technology does not appreciate itself, nor does it have the capacity to even evaluate its own condition, existence. And we can write a software where a robot can ask those questions, but that's just what we told it to say. And in the world of single cells, we see that we can take a tree, a person, an animal, and as we break them down, we find more organisms, more living things, more living beings. It's kind of like this fractal structure of life. But with technology, the more you break it down, the less you find, both in function and in even identity of what the object was before. So there's no life within those objects, not in their parts or the whole, where in human beings, for example, there is life throughout. Every part of our body is alive, is conscious. So it's something that philosophically we can see and understand, and it's something that, you know, a car is not made out of smaller cars, where a human cell is made out of smaller cells. There's something about that structure. There's something about the way life grows and expands, and we can see that consciousness itself has a place within bodies of water and these structures, and then the technology around us is just housing, casing, technology that extends further out from consciousness and helps support it within this environment of space, in a sense. And our bodies are the transition point between consciousness and matter, and for that reason we're the ones that are being mapped in order to extend consciousness out to matter in the future. We're not mapping any rock, any other structure. We haven't found any other place where consciousness and thought, desire, ideas for the future come from. That is the thing we're mapping, our brains, our minds, our bodies. That is where the broadcast is, from consciousness out to matter. With all of our technologies, if there was something else, we would have found it. If we could have put any type of materials in any combination and suddenly create a portal into consciousness, we would have done it. It would have been here. We would have detected that, or even be close to that. But that's not even on the horizon. All we can do is work with living organisms, organizations of consciousness, and from them extend out, and basically build out from them. We mentioned the negativity that comes with thoughts about technology, artificial intelligence, and there's room for that. There's room for us to be careful. There's room for us to educate people about how they are part of a bigger body, so we don't misuse and misdesign artificial intelligence and technologies to harm, destroy, and give one person dominance over the rest rather than help extend and build further into the future. So that's the reason we talk so much about separation and the idea that there's no separation, or the ideas within evolution that makes people think that they are better in a way, and that gives them the right to harm others, or that gives them a higher priority up in the pyramid of life. So we are part of one body, and we're all coming up with ideas in many different fields, and together we climb up. But just like we don't mix poison with our food or with our medicine, just like we make safety rules, and even in our construction world, anywhere, this is safety issues. So between consciousness and matter, between creation and destruction, there's always safety involved. So it is important how we educate people. It is important what softwares we write. It is important what weapons we make. We don't want to destroy ourselves by mistake. We have that freedom. We have that ability. So with all the misinformation that is out there right now, it is important to understand that no AI will go out there and seek to kill us unless we told it to do so. Unless somebody thought that it would be a good idea for them to gain dominance over the world by doing so. So that's something that is important to talk about. It's something that's important to think about as we educate people towards the future. And it's important to have a reality check about artificial intelligence and everything we read about it when you talk to scientists that actually deal with the issue, not just the articles, the clickbait stuff you see online that is trying just to get you to read something negative because they know there's more chance of you reading that. When you talk to scientists, they will tell you that we are far, far away from any kind of general intelligence, from AI achieving anything close to consciousness. I mean, the computers can hardly know how to open one door, let alone 500 different types of doors. So when we think about artificial intelligence, we need to understand the dangers that are currently there. They're more basic as we automate the world around us, and we don't think about everyone as being one fabric, one body of humanity. So we might lose many, many jobs. People will be homeless, people will be left out, replaced by technology, not understanding that we liberated them from work rather than basically gave them a death sentence because now they have no means of making money and surviving in this system. And the second part is, again, understanding that you as an individual should not use AI to dominate the rest of the world and achieving that same goal, or creating this huge military and just ways of basically dominating, harassing, destroying by using advantage of technology over the rest. Understanding that any hate is self-hate. Anything you do to destroy, you destroy your own and yourself. So Those are the two elements that are really in front of us. Whether it's somebody using weapons to destroy others, or somebody using technology to advance their personal economic agenda rather than the greater body of consciousness growth as nature grows together. So the goal for today is to start having this conversation about the extension of consciousness into matter through technology, through artificial intelligence, understanding what they are and what they are not. We will have a complete video just about artificial intelligence and how it will never be conscious in the way that we are, but it will merge with us and extend us further out into the material world in that sense. So thank you very much for watching today, and we'll see you soon.